Good morning, and thank you for registering for Tracing the Hidden Half, Finding and Documenting Your Female Ancestors. I'm Kate Kisselstein, the Junior Librarian at Central Library's Local History and Genealogy Department. So why did I call this Tracing the Hidden Half? It's because half of our direct ancestors are female, but it can be very difficult to trace them down using traditional sources. In the Anglophone world especially, women traditionally have taken their husband's surname and could simply be known in records as Mrs. John Smith, for example. In addition, they were often not allowed to own property in their own name or vote. There are even instances where they could lose their US citizenship if they married an immigrant, and that's providing that their names were recorded at all. So here's a timeline for you, or at least part of a timeline for you. According to author Mary Beth Norton, under the common law, legal law doctrine known as coverture, a married woman in the British North American colonies and later even in the United States had hardly any legal existence apart from her husband. She was considered a femme couverte. Her rights and obligations were subsumed under his. She could not own property, enter into contracts, bring a lawsuit, or earn a salary in her own name. An unmarried woman, a femme sole, on the other hand, had the right to own property and make contracts in her own name. In the Encyclopedia Britannica, it further states that unless some prior specific provision separating a woman's property from her husband's had been made, coverture stripped a woman of control over real and personal property, and this would include any slaves she might have owned. Beginning in 1839 in Mississippi, states began to enact legislation overriding the disabilities associated with coverture. They established the rights of women to enjoy the profits of their labor, to control real and personal property, to be parties to lawsuits and contracts, and to execute wills on their own behalf. And I'm highlighting New York State here because when they abolished it in 1848, with the passage of the Married Women's Property Act, this law became the template for other states to grant married women the right to own property. Coverture was a major issue in the women's suffrage movement. Women's suffrage, however, was still nearly non-existent when in 1869, William Bright, a saloon keeper and president of the upper house of the Wyoming Territory, introduced a bill granting all female residents 21 years and older the right to vote. According to the Wyoming State Historical Society, the territorial legislature had already passed progressive measures guaranteeing women teachers the same pay as men and granting married women property rights apart from their husbands. Bright's measure backing universal women's suffrage, however, would be groundbreaking in the United States. It would be over 50 years later, on August 18th, 1920, that the 19th Amendment would finally be ratified. And the doctrine of coverture is one of the reasons you might have problems finding your female ancestor in traditional sources, but that's not the only obstacle. Going back a little bit, we've got women and naturalization, and the Nationality Act of 1790. According to the National Archives, Congress first defined eligibility for citizenship by naturalization in this law and limited this important right to free white persons. In practice, only white male property owners could naturalize and acquire the status of citizens, whereas women, non-white persons, and indentured servants could not. Access to citizenship would become more expansive over time, although the racial restriction was not eliminated entirely until 1952. This law produced the legal category of aliens ineligible for citizenship, which largely affected Asian immigrants and limited their rights as non-citizens to key realms of life in the United States, such as property ownership, representation in courts, public employment, and voting. In addition, As early as 1804, the law began to draw distinctions regarding married women in naturalization law. Since that date, and until 1934, when a man filed a declaration of intention to become a citizen, but died prior to naturalization, his widow and minor children were considered as citizens of the United States if they appeared in court and took the oath of allegiance and renunciation. Thus, among naturalization court records, one could find a record of a woman taking the oath, but find no corresponding declaration for her, and perhaps even no petition. The Act of February 10th, 1855, was designed to benefit immigrant women. Under that act, any woman who is now or may hereafter be married to a citizen of the United States and who might herself be lawfully naturalized shall be deemed a citizen. Thus, alien women generally became U.S. citizens by marriage to a U.S. citizen or through an alien husband's naturalization. Now, on March 2nd, 1907, however, Congress mandated that any American woman who marries a foreigner shall take the nationality of her husband. Upon marriage, regardless of where the couple resided, the woman's legal identity morphed into her husband's. Women who had never left their hometown, perhaps even never left their own home, suddenly found themselves ineligible for certain types of employment, as they were required to register as aliens. In addition, if their husband was not eligible to petition for naturalization, neither was she. And the process tended to be a lengthy one. It could take over 5 years. Almost a century after women sought the right to vote, the 19th Amendment was finally ratified. This caused some politicians to look at the Expatriation Act in a new light. One such politician was John L. Cable, a representative from Ohio. The Cable Act addressed the discriminatory law that set married women's citizenship according to that of their husbands and enabled white women to retain their U.S. citizenship despite marriages to foreign men. This right did not, however, extend to women who married aliens ineligible for citizenship, especially Asian immigrant men. There were additional amendments to this act, and among the many provisions of the Nationality Act of 1940 was the reinstatement of U.S. citizenship for American-born women who had lost it under the Expatriation Act of 1907, without need of undergoing full naturalization process. So if it's so difficult to trace your female ancestors, why should you bother? As genealogist Lisa Lisson states, there are at least 4 reasons. You should search for them to solve a family mystery, to extend the family line back further, to uncover your ancestor's story, and or to join a lineage society. And thanks to the recent 2023 Roots Tech conference, I learned of a 5th one. Through FamilySearch.org's famous relatives activity, you may find that, like me, you're related to Agatha Christie, Katharine Hepburn, and even Amelia Earhart. To get started, it's best to keep your search activities organized, either through printed forms or electronically. That's why I began using a genealogy research plan, and a good, basic, free research template can be found on the New England Historic Genealogical Society's website, AmericanAncestors.org. A couple of items not on their form to include would be your name and the date of your search. That way, you'll know what steps you've already taken when you come back to your results weeks, months, or yes, even years later. So some places that you can search for records for your female ancestors include Central Library's Local History and Genealogy Department, which is a family search affiliate library, or your own local public library. It's also key to check libraries that are local to where your ancestor lived and or worked. Some centralized genealogy centers, aside from the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, Utah, are the Allen County Public Library's Genealogy Center in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and the Midwest Genealogy Center in Independence, Missouri. It should almost go without saying but check with your local genealogical societies and historical societies to see what records they might have, as well as any connections they might help you make to partner societies or libraries in the areas where your ancestor lived. Learning the history of the area where your ancestor lived can help put things into context, as well as alert you to any potential events or people that she may be connected with. Archives can be another great resource, keeping in mind that not everything has been digitized or indexed, but family papers can be donated to all sorts of places. For example, I found a compilation of church records for Oneida County, New York, that only exists in the archives of Michigan. There are so many people and places you can go to in order to search your female ancestor. You never know where your next clue might come from. Central's Local History and Genealogy Department and other libraries hold copies of family genealogies and histories, both in printed and manuscript formats. Don't forget to check for ladies' aid societies and other women's auxiliary groups. Stores also used to keep customer account books that would keep track of monthly transactions by the account holder's family members, which could include daughters and wives. Other underutilized sources are newspaper recipe columns, church and community cookbooks, and yes, even some quilts can hold clues to your female ancestor. One of the genealogical proof standards requires your search to be exhaustive, which is why it's important to look both online and offline. On digitized book websites, you may find scanned copies of older out-of-print sources such as local histories and city directories, those church and community cookbooks, religious organization membership histories, and much more. As for digitized newspaper sites, in addition to birth, marriage, and death announcements, you may find your ancestor listed in the society pages, the Facebook of their day. While there are advantages to searching online, be aware of disadvantages too, such as keywords may be missed due to issues with legibility or lower resolution scans or damage to the original item. Full text and access may be behind a paywall, and not everything is going to be fully digitized. I'm sure at least some of you may have run into results on Ancestry that can show you the record, but not the image. And it's when you see the little small icon that looks like a blank index card. To get full details of the record, then, you need to consult the non-digital version of the record, which luckily I found Central Library's Local History and Genealogy Department holds a lot of those print resources. Although there are numerous sites for digitized materials, these 4 sites are some of the musts that have been recommended by professional genealogists. The Family Search Digital Library is in the process of digitizing the Family Search book collection, as well as those of 12 additional partners, including Onondaga County Public Libraries. Google Books contain over 40 million scanned books and periodicals, including some from Harvard University. While they are no longer actively digitizing themselves, they do accept digitized content from partners. HathiTrust Digital Library contains titles from Google Books and the Internet Archive, as well as those from their academic partners based in the US, Canada, and Europe. You may have access through a student or alumni account or through one of their guest account options. And the Internet Archive is continually growing. It has over 30 million books and texts, which includes microfilm, 8.9 million videos, 13.2 million audio files, and 13.88 million images. It's also the home of the Wayback Machine, which you may have heard of, and it allows you to search archived web pages, and there are over 580 billion web pages and counting. This information comes from around the globe, not just here in the US. Now, as to digitized newspapers, these 3 sites are free, so they can be consulted from the comfort of your own home. Chronicling America is a website providing access to information about historic newspapers from 1690 to the present and select digitized newspaper pages from 1770 to 1963. It is produced by the National Digital Newspaper Program, a partnership between the National Endowment for Humanities and the Library of Congress. Fulton History is, yes, from Fulton, New York, and is a searchable repository of historic newspapers published in New York State and the United States between 1795 and 2007, and it's frequently updated. It also includes a handful of international newspapers. There are over 47 million digitized pages. And New York State historical newspapers contain searchable full text and page images of over 400 New York-based newspapers dating from 1795 to 2014. The map on the homepage allows you to browse publications by county. Now, these two are subscription-based digitized newspaper sites, but they may be available through your local public library. Newspaper Archive is one is a database that's provided by Central Library. It allows you to search for billions of old newspaper articles from all over the world, dating from 1607 to the present. While it does offer some pages for free, full access requires a subscription. And newspapers.com is owned by Ancestry. It is the largest online newspaper archive consisting of 300 plus million pages of historical newspapers from 11,100 newspapers from around the United States and beyond, with special focus on full runs and portions of runs of well-known regional and state titles, in addition to small local newspapers. The collection includes a broad range of dates, mostly covering the 19th and 20th centuries. The following lesser utilized sites can all be consulted from the comfort of your own home, which again can help you glean more information and narrow down the focus of your in-person search. Archive Grid is a collection of over 7 million archival material descriptions. It provides access to detailed archival collection descriptions such as documents, personal papers, family histories, and other archival materials held by thousands of libraries, museums, historical societies, and archives. It also provides contact information for the institutions where these collections are kept. Those of you who are more experienced in genealogy will have heard of Cindy's List, which started as a labor of love by genealogist Cindy Engel over 20 years ago. It's currently a one-woman operation and is a repository of over 330,000 genealogy-related links. Best of all, it's free. Most, if not all, professional genealogists consider this an invaluable resource, and you should too. The Family Search Catalog includes records from all over the world. The largest collections of records are from North America, Europe, and the British Isles, Central America, and South America, with more limited collections of records from Asia and the Pacific Islands. The records range from the mid-1900s back as far as the 1300s in some instances. It is key to accessing the vast collection of microfilm, microfiche, and printed volumes held at the Family Search Library. And if there's a Family Search catalog, why should you bother with their research wiki? Because it's an online genealogical guide created and maintained by Family Search. It contains links to genealogy databases, websites, other resources, research strategies, and genealogical guidance to assist in the search for your female ancestor. Articles included are locality pages for countries around the world and topic pages that include pertinent genealogy record types, explaining how to use the record, what it contains, and how to find it. Just a few more sites, and then we'll get to the case study. The National Archives Catalog contains descriptions for their nationwide holdings in Washington, D.C., regional facilities, and presidential libraries. The catalog is a work in progress and currently contains descriptions for 95% of their records, described at the series level. This means you can find basic information about the records, including size and location, from the description. Additionally, every week they are adding more file units and item descriptions, many of which include digital files. National Archives, the passports section. Passport applications can be an excellent source of genealogical information, especially about the foreign-born individuals. The National Archives and Records Administration has applications from October 1795 to March 1925. The U.S. Department of State has the passport applications from April 1925 to the present. Although 95% of mid-19th century passport applicants were men, many women also traveled overseas. If the applicant was to be accompanied by his wife, children, servants, or other females under his protection, their names, ages, and relationship to the applicant were stated on the application. One passport was then issued to cover the whole group. Likewise, when children traveled abroad solely with their mother, their names and ages were indicated on the mother's passport application. These applications by women in their own names became more frequent in the latter part of the 19th century, and by 1923, women constituted over 40% of the applicants. And I have to mention the Quilt Index, which was originally launched in 2003. It is an open access digital repository of thousands of images, stories, and information about quilts and their makers drawn from hundreds of public and private collections around the world. It represents the work of thousands of community-based and independent scholars, digital humanists, and professionals in libraries, archives, and museums who are dedicated to preserving and making accessible quilt history. Lastly, WorldCat is a great resource for locating unique, trustworthy materials that you often can't find anywhere except in a library. And by connecting thousands of libraries' collections in one place, WorldCat makes it easy for you to browse the world's libraries from one easy search box. During the past 50+ years, thousands of libraries have entered their information about millions of books, magazines, movies, songs, maps, genealogical records, and research theses, and so much more into their database. And it's not just the physical items you could find when you visit a library, but many kinds of digital content like open source ebooks, articles, downloadable audiobooks, and photos. You can also find article citations with links to full text, authoritative research materials, one-of-a-kind documents and photos of local or historic significance, and digital versions of care items that aren't generally available to the public. This is also where libraries go to find titles that you'd like to interlibrary loan. Now to the heart of the presentation. You'll notice that you should focus on the males in your lost female ancestor's life, not other females. This is because tracing her mother, sisters, and/or daughters may prove just as problematic as tracing her. You should also look for evidence of her in her children's marriage and death records. For example, one question I dealt with was for a Georgia Smith, listed in her own obituary as just Mrs. Charles Allen, and which stated that she died in her husband's residence. It's only in her son's 1910 marriage license that I learned her full maiden name and that she was born in Fayette, New York. Here is a personal case study, a brick wall that I've run into, that of one of my maternal 3 times great-grandmothers, Charlotte Robinson. We had family lore that she was related to a Revolutionary War vet, but family lore is not going to be sufficient evidence if I wanted to, for example, join the DAR. In order to better trace her ancestors and find the right records, I need to track down her maiden name. And yes, I already know that her maiden name wasn't Bennett, despite the appearances, as she's buried near one of her sons, Julius F. Bennett. Consulting FultonHistory.com, I found her obituary in the Clinton Courier for Wednesday, October 5th, 1898. Her obituary doesn't provide us with her maiden name, unfortunately, yet it does provide more details as we now have the full names of her husbands, including the order of marriage, as well as the fact that she lived her entire life in Oneida County, New York. With information like this, you could use Chronicling America to find out what newspapers were published in the area during her lifetime, and possibly search them online and check for microfilm copies. You could check the Family Search Research Wiki to see what documents might be available for Oneida County and if there are any for the town she lived in. She may have been part of an auxiliary or other women's group, or contributed recipes to a community cookbook, or helped sew a quilt. The next steps are to search for marriage records or notices, which means not just searching digitized newspapers, but also the Family Research Wiki and WorldCat to see what church and or court records might be available for Oneida County, New York. After checking to see what church records might be available on the Family Search Research Wiki and striking out with digital records there, I used their link to search WorldCat. And a tip is that clicking the link from Family Search's Research Wiki will pre-populate the search for the related subject terms you need to uncover the records. The results there showed me that several print options were held right here at Central Library. While I couldn't locate records for Charlotte marrying Robert Robinson, I did locate the marriage record for her second marriage, where she's listed as Charlotte Bennett with John J. Palmer. While Family Search does have the 1850 U.S. Federal Census online, I also wanted to show the one I located on Ancestry Library Edition. There is an option to email the record to yourself or download it to the computer, where you can save it to a flash drive and then upload it to your tree later on. There is no mention of John J. Palmer, or Parmer, as the transcribed version states, just Charlotte with her 5 sons, her youngest being 3-year-old Albert, the son she had with John. Thanks to the Family Search Research Wiki, I know that there was an 1850 U.S. mortality census, which included deaths between June 1849 and May 1850, where I found that John was a married shoemaker who died of consumption in July 1849 in Kirkland, Oneida County, New York. While having Charlotte's marriage to John Palmer is helpful, I haven't begun to exhaust the search for her with Robert Robinson. Given the previous 1850 census record result, however, I am able to narrow down that Charlotte married Robert Robinson sometime after July 1850. Searching for a marriage notice on Fulton History, though, I find a different kind of record. Charlotte is mentioned with Robert Robinson in an Oneida County Supreme Court case, which was reported in 1856. The estate in question belonged to one William Griffin, but no matter how likely, I can't be certain that Charlotte is a direct relation to William. So back to the census records. I didn't have luck with the 1855 New York State Census, which is due to the fact that not every town in every county participated. I do have some luck with the 1860 U.S. Federal Census, however. I know these are the right Robert and Charlotte, as Julius Bennett and Albert Palmer are both enumerated in the same family number. I'm still not having much luck tracking down when they got married or in learning about Charlotte's ancestry. Going back to her obituary, she died in the home of her son, Charles H. Bennett, so I'm more apt to find other mentions of her in conjunction with him. While I did find lots of instances of Mrs. Charlotte Robinson visiting her son, got to love those society pages, it's not until I locate Charles's obituary that I get a hit. I could take this information and try to track down her marriage to Julius Bennett, but given that he was her first husband, it's looking like Griffin is her maiden name. Her connection to William Griffin warrants a search. Back on Fulton History for another search, this time looking for mentions of Charlotte and William Griffin with the surname Robinson, Palmer, or Bennett. This search result now confirms that Charlotte Robinson, as she was known in 1891, was the daughter of William Griffin. William was the son of Nathaniel Griffin, who was deeded 315 acres of land by President George Washington and New York Governor Clinton. This article also provides some additional town and county names that can be used when searching the Family Search Research Wiki and Ancestry Library Edition, as well as on other sites. For purposes of joining the DAR, I'll need records that confirm that this Nathaniel Griffin is a Revolutionary War veteran. It will require further digging, but that will be a topic for a possible future program. So I now have my results from the search, and I still have plenty of pieces of missing information to fill in, but I'm further along than when I started, and I'm in the perfect location to do more digging, the Local History and Genealogy Department at OCPL's Central Library.